Hello. This is the last panel session of the day, and I know enthusiasm is still high, so let's get it together. I am so excited to be able to introduce our next panel. We're looking at building a battery manufacturing industry. We have some severe experts on this panel, so I'm really looking forward to the discussion. It's only 30 minutes long, so we will try and answer any questions at the end if we have time, so do put your hand up at the end. So hello everyone, my name is Veronica Bolton-Smith, or Ronnie when I'm not in trouble. I am the CEO of the Connect Africa Network, connecting investors to investment opportunities in Africa. 20 years essentially supporting investment drive into the continent of Africa. And I'll start off with a quick summary and then I'll pass over to my colleagues on the panel to introduce themselves. So I just wanted to share what a difference 15 years can make. In 2010, batteries powered our phones and computers, and today they are powering our cars and our homes as well. Over the last 15 years, a surge in lithium-ion production drove down prices to the point that for the first time in history, electric vehicles became commercially viable from the standpoint of both cost and performance. The next phase will be looking at how we can build utility-scale storage. Many markets in Asia and America dominate the battery manufacturing space, and it will be intriguing to hear from our panel what learnings we can take and what has been working well and what hasn't been working so well, and also where the opportunities for investment lie, and what those barriers to investment might be in the sector, and how, of course, to confirm financing for these projects. Also, a key consideration is sustainability when building any industry, but never more so than in this space of battery manufacturing and processing. And we will hear from our industry experts today on this. Also key to the discussion will also be how Africa, with its plethora of critical and rare earth minerals, can generate value addition for the continent facing a population boom in 2030. Job creation and value addition are of vital importance to a continent that will have an extremely high youth population. With all this in mind, battery manufacturing and processing is changing on a literal daily basis. I read with interest 2 days ago, and I'm sure many of you saw the same article, that Microsoft, via AI, has identified a new material to reduce the use of lithium in batteries. It is estimated that it will reduce up to 70% of lithium use. If this recent discovery is anything to go by, it is that we can't rely on any one type of chemistry when looking at battery processing and manufacturing. Essentially, will governments and companies back the correct course, or is this an industry still in a huge R&D phase? Let me now hand over to my panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to the questions. So over to you, Wilfredo.
So I'm Wilfredo Reyes. I am the founder and CEO of the Critical Minerals Association USA, operating out of Washington, D.C.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ling Lu. I'm based in Hong Kong, working for Standard Chartered in the metals and mining business, mainly responsible for the M&A and also financing for the Chinese clients as well as Korean and Japanese companies.
Thank you. My name is Alawi Shaban Swaburi. I'm Tanzanian, based in Germany, and the founder of the Africa Battery Initiative.
Hi everyone, my name is Greg Pitt and I lead Worley's strategic growth in battery materials. For those that don't know of us, Worley is one of the largest engineering and project delivery companies operating in this sector.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, so my first question to you, Ling, at Standard Chartered Bank. You're a well-known bank working across multiple jurisdictions, and I'm keen to understand what you've witnessed as the key trends in battery manufacturing and processing, and also where are the competitive markets, and how can countries and continents make themselves more competitive in this space? And what have you been, I would love you to share some success and exit stories as well, and what governments might be able to do to make themselves investor ready.
Sure, Ronnie.
Lots of questions there.
Yeah, lots of questions. So I guess, first and foremost, lots going on in the battery space. But the biggest theme that we are seeing is a bifurcated supply chain is formulating, which is driven by the geopolitical tensions. So the Inflation Reduction Act has been driving the investment activities into North America with the intention to set up a new supply chain that is independent from China. So you've seen it's driving the Western companies to build new production facilities across the supply chain, especially around critical minerals and also the battery components. But in the meantime, it's also driving the Chinese companies to invest out of China to, especially in the countries that have free trade agreement with the US. But there are lots of interest in the kingdom as well. They would like to come into the kingdom and build those facilities, and that's mainly attracted by the incentive policies. So that's one trend. The other one that I am seeing is the regional production hubs that are being established. So for example, Indonesia has become a dominating player in nickel processing, producing close to 50% of the global supply. But sitting here, I do see there's lots of potential for this region. This is a super region. For example, Morocco, would it become the next Indonesia? Probably yes. Over the past 12 months, we have seen lots of Chinese and also South Korean investment into the country, trying to establish the battery materials production facilities. And also, Morocco has a cleaner energy mix, which is ideal as we look for net zero battery supply chain. So I guess this addresses your question one. Mm-hmm. And then if we look at what are the countries that's leading in this space, I would think is Asia, namely China, South Korea, and Japan. As we all know, Japan commercialized the production of lithium-ion batteries in the 1990s. And then it's the South Korean companies, Samsung, LG, who caught up. And now it's really the Chinese who have scaled up the production and also leading on the technological innovation. So how did they do that, and what parallels can we draw from them? I think mainly three things. One is the integrated supply chain. So if we take BYD is a perfect example. So they basically produce everything except the windscreen and the tire. So this not only minimizes the supply risk, but also it ensures the margin when the commodity prices are trending up. The second one is technological innovation. Lots of people, when they look at CATL, they kind of, surprised. It's a young company. It's only established in 2011. However, it's originated from ATL, another company that had been producing batteries for laptops and mobile phones over the past 10 years before CATL was established. So there has been significant technological accumulation, and also CATL has been spending significant money on the R&D. Each year is around 5% to 8% of its annual sales, and the number was around $2 billion last year. Last but not least, I would think is the effective public policy and also a culture that embraces competition. So recently we have seen lots of trade barriers and also protection. If we take example of Tesla. So when Tesla was first brought to China, lots of people were calling the wolf is coming. Everyone's kind of afraid because for the smaller and also less competitive companies, they would easily go bust. So yes, short-term pain, of course, is causing short-term pain, but long-term wise, if we look back now, it has really cultivated the development of an integrated supply chain. Is definitely beneficial in the long run. And I think that also explains why when Tesla came to China, China lifted the ban of foreign control and let Tesla to have 100% of the ownership. So maybe I'll just stop there.
Thank you. There's lots to consider in there.
Yeah.
Have you heard? Yeah, thank you. Lots to consider, and for any new markets looking to move into this space, I think there's definitely be able to look at Southeast Asia for some examples of what's worked. Moving on to you, Greg. A key consideration when building any new industry is this issue of sustainability. Worley is a world-leading business delivering sustainable change. What do you look for when working with multiple critical and rare earth minerals to develop batteries and to deliver this in a sustainable way? What's worked, what hasn't worked, and what would you like to see more of to continue to drive sustainable change, given that this is down to multiple stakeholders?
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. Look, I think one thing that many people not that familiar with the industry don't understand deeply is the actual impact of the production of the minerals, their refining, their processing, the environmental impact of this value chain that produces, ultimately, at the end of the day, an electric vehicle. We all think electric vehicles are a critical part of our future as we transition to an electric future. But I think particularly many consumers, but even those that are new to the industry or have operated in parallel industries, don't understand the true environmental impact and perhaps a broader impact of what it takes to make these end products and what it takes to make every intermediate product along the way. So I'm glad you asked, because sustainability, certainly for Worley, this is absolutely fundamental to how we have pivoted and focused our own organisation to look at what can we be doing to develop assets, to develop projects that are sustainable in their nature, not just in the way they are built, but also in the types of products or commodities that they produce or refine. But it doesn't always work out the way you would expect. And to perhaps answer your question, what's worked well, what hasn't, let me start with what hasn't. We've seen, I'll talk about a couple of examples, but we've seen a project we did a few years ago up in Finland, which was a PCAM facility, for those that know what that means, cathode material, which after we had finished the work, we built the plant, the client had their permit revoked by the local authorities when it was realised how much waste was coming out of this, or was going to come out of this facility once it was going to be made operational. Waste streams, sodium sulfate, particularly in cathode material manufacturing, and the refining of its components, is a huge waste stream, a huge problem. This event, which has now been sorted out, they put a crystallizer on, and they're now moving through to startup. But it triggered a recognition, a realisation, certainly in the European community, which I'm now seeing start to flow elsewhere, that these things aren't sustainable by their very nature. The processes are complex. The amount of energy required to operate all of the facilities along the value chain is enormous. And there's an education process needed across communities, across participants in the industry, across the governments and the authorities as to what actually the impact is. Because I think if it's not understood at the outset, then you run into trouble as you move down through your project or your investment plan. On the flip side, we are seeing, and perhaps now more recently, your positive responses, a different way of thinking about how to go about asset development in this sector. And as I think as Ling was saying, outside of Asia, the rest of us, the rest of the world is having to react quickly and move really quickly into this market and develop and build new value chains, new industries at pace. There is opportunity to do that and think about how to actually be more sustainable, not just in an individual asset necessarily, but how to look at the energy mix. Where can you get low cost, reliable, green or renewable energy from? Nordics, Quebec, good places to start, but Morocco as well shaping up. What are the waste streams coming out? How can you turn a waste stream into a byproduct or a feedstock for some other adjacent facility? How can you recycle water, energy through these plants? And so it's taking a different mindset to perhaps the traditional project development approach that certainly we're used to, and applying, not just assessing sustainability throughout a project, but using it to actually drive the decision making and the design process as you work through. And a couple of sort of specific examples we see, perhaps at a little bit more macro level, again, in Europe, a lot of the chemical majors in Europe that are operating in this space, BASF, Umicore, Northvolt, are now considering closed-loop systems as a basis, as a default approach to development. And what I mean by that is they're not just thinking about the linear trajectory of a mineral from the ground through into ultimately an end product that's then sold to a consumer, used and disposed of. They recognise that this industry has to be circular. Now in Europe, they are mandated to be circular. They are mandated to recycle, right? And it's probably currently world's best practice in terms of sustainability policy settings. And so they've reacted and said, well, we are going to build closed-loop systems, circular systems, where we will recover the material where it comes out as waste, out as rejects, out as off-spec, damaged, or end of life, and bring that back into the value chain. So we're actually consuming less virgin material, and we're extracting more value out of the minerals because we can reuse them over and over again. So yeah, we're seeing it work well, but at the same time, even a recycling development, it's not a single party that's involved. The logistics in collecting batteries, collecting end-of-life vehicles, bringing them all back in across, as in Europe, various different countries, requires a huge number of stakeholders to be involved to make that actually work in reality.
Thanks, Greg. And very clear from what you've said there that sustainability can actually be of great benefit to any strategy development people are thinking about, rather than thinking of it as a buzzword, which I think often...
Well, what I'd say, because I think many people think, if I'm going to have to make it more sustainable, it's probably going to cost me more to do so. And my response would be, yes, if you think about it after the fact. But if you bring that thinking right into the early phase, as you are even conceiving an investment, and you think about how do I do this in a sustainable way from the start, it does not need to necessarily cost more. And there are some companies out there, Vulcan in Germany, that has gone about with a clear plan that we're going to make zero carbon lithium. We are not going to add any carbon into the atmosphere as a result of the lithium we produce from the ground, which I think is tremendous. Let's see how they go as they get their plans unfolding. But
thanks so much for that. I'll move on to you, Sawbury, from the Africa Battery Initiative. So moving from sustainability on to looking at how Africa can create value addition on the continent. And I think it's vital we think in that framework because there's a plethora of critical minerals in Africa, namely cobalt and lithium, which has recently been discovered in many pockets of the continent. And I'm just keen to understand, how can the continent create value addition? What are the steps that need to be taken? Maybe you could share also a little bit about the recent development in the DRC and Zambia with the recent MOU signing and Zambia now being the off-taker to make some batteries there. If you share with us and the audience, what can we learn from that? Is it possible to replicate across the continent what's gone on in the DRC and Zambia? I think that's very exciting. And also, could you share with us what you see, what we might see other countries on the continent develop, if we see other countries on the continent develop similar strategies, and what the time and cost implications might be for that?
Thank you very much indeed for having me here. So I think that related to a question on value addition in Africa. So our institution, the Africa Battery Initiative, is really focusing on making sure that we promote the critical mineral investment from the oil supply chain, making sure that we start from extraction, exploration, up to the refinery. So from that point of refinery, we, according to our policy that most of African countries now are not allowing any critical mineral to be exported without the value being added in that country. So our role is to identify investors from all over the world to come up to that point of a refinery. And after that, 70% of the refinery critical mineral is allowed to be exported to the country of investor, and 30% of that to remain in that country for purpose of, let's say, battery manufacturing. That is where we come now to that point. So, of course, we don't have the fund or the critical, the fund to go from the mining up to that point. So we rely on investor to bring us to that point of a refinery. So he asked me about the Zambia and the DRC. Of course, the project has been signed between Zambia, DRC, in cooperation with the United States, which has also shown a very big interest to support the establishment of the electric car manufacturing plant in Zambia. But I'm having a very wonderful example that I would like to share with the people here, that the example of Tanzania. I'm from Tanzania, and the project of the battery manufacturer is African Battery Baby, because we started that one, and up to this point I can explain everything that we have been going through. So in order to have electrical battery manufacturing plant, you need at least 5 pillars. So one pillar is, of course, to have the critical mineral, which we get from the 30% remaining in our country after the investor has taken 70% to his country of origin. And then, of course, we need investor, we need the technology. This is the point. So in relation to the technology, we are cooperating with the Chinese Central Southern University of China. We are also cooperating with the Hubei University of China, which is now going to create a very huge battery technology center at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. This has been agreed. And then the third point, of course, is in off-taker. So in order to have the component produced, you need to have an off-taker. So we are now in discussion with a company like VW. Of course, I'm based in Germany for the last 25 years. I've been living there. So we have VW, we have everybody, and we even have a BYD from China, which is really very much interested to engage in off-taking. But the first point of pillar is, of course, not only technology. Now, university I mentioned, they are ready to do that. But we are also involved with one of the biggest electrical manufacturing entity on our planet, which is CATL from China. So they are also very much interested to cooperate with Tanzania in making sure that this electrical manufacturing plant will be kick-start within this year. So this is one point. But the most important, as you said, is energy, utility. So where do we get the energy in order to have the refinery and the smelting? So this is a very high energy consuming undertaking. So Tanzania has addressed this point where we have maybe before the end of this year, we'll be having 2.1 gigawatt of hydroelectric power plant, which is already, it will be up and running before the end of this year. This is one. And then, of course, as we're talking about the energy mixture, we have wind power and some other small hydroelectric power. Combining them together, we'll be making sure that we have enough energy to address the smelting but this is one point. But commotion from A to Z, you also need, of course, not to live to have a zero footprint when it comes to commotion. That is where we have SGR, the standard railway gauge, connecting Tanzania, Burundi up all the way to DRC. So making sure that from the commotion of the critical mineral from that point, where there will also be looking to be exported to the port of Dar es Salaam, so everything is like zero emission. So this is more or less the concept that our country are sharing, in particular Tanzania now. So we are there, maybe before the end of this year. Now, the one thing very important, the president of China is visiting our country in this year. So it will be another added value to making sure that we finalize this process.
Excellent news, and we hope that visit will benefit, skills exchange and so forth. But something also just to add to what you were saying there, there's the Lobito corridor that's just been signed as well. So that presents some interesting opportunities for trading and looking at that corridor in terms of how to develop the value chain. So we look and we're excited by that. And thanks for that insight. Last but not least, Wilfredo. So Wilfredo is the CEO of the Critical Minerals Association in the USA and presents, the US angle on this panel. And I just wondered what you would say are the key competitive aspects of the US battery industry versus global competitors.
How much time you have? That's a loaded question, but
Everyone wants to go home, but go on.
I'll be short and sweet. I'm optimistic about how the market and the U.S. has sent a clear message as to how we are incentivizing the battery industry. I would say, to summarize it in 3 key aspects, we've got, I would say, strong potential because of the tech edge that the U.S. has in terms of company, IP protection, R&D capacity, universities, academia help, all those, including the consumer applications, which I know that many people often, when they think about the battery industry, immediately they go to EVs. But there's so much more applications that are important for national security and defense in the U.S. and abroad, and also for storage. There's and consumer electronics, which, by the way, I'm trying to teach my nephews and nieces where the connection is between the mining and the phone, which is hard for them to understand, but we're making progress. Anyhow, those 3 aspects, I would say, that the strong potential that the market has, it's a good sign. The second aspect of it would be the strong allocation or strategic allocation of resources in the U.S. I'm sure you're all aware that Nevada, Arizona, and some other states coming online. Tennessee recently announced a big commitment from LG to produce the biggest cathode and anode manufacturing capabilities in the U.S. And one thing that sometimes people overlook, and this is something that I've learned throughout my legal career as an attorney in the U.S., started and shifted from federal court to economic development, and now I'm here. And I strongly believe that we have an opportunity. Where there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. We feel that the U.S. has 3 levels of government. I see it as an economic development venture. People often concentrate in what the federal government offers, which is the incentives, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and Science Act, and the tech hubs. All those are fine. But I would say that in order for your project or venture to have a bigger probability of being successful, you go bottom up, meaning you go and you meet with the locals, counties, cities, municipalities, majors, and you, at the same token, try to find partners on the state side, which have very, very good teams that do economic development that help a venture. Even if it is an R&D capacity, you'll find a lot of incentives there, which leads to my third aspect, which is strong supporting policies. And all those policies, people often focus on the federal side. I would encourage, which is what we do as an association, help members navigate on a more strategic fashion where those pockets of funding are. And you can leverage those for your capital stack. It's not just the federal government. And I would say to summarize it, to stay, as a global leader, the U.S. needs to focus on 3 areas that we as an association also have promoted and enabled to make connections and networking opportunities for many of our members, but we bridge the gap between the public and private sectors so that we can have real industry representatives talking about their products. Because I think, if anything, history has shown that we're in a pivotal moment. We are in what I know that many others have called the new industrial revolution of our generation. And we can all contribute. And that's what I intend to do, because it's not just talking about sustainability. It's fun to be in panels or do speaker engagements. But I strongly believe that there's an output and an action part, which leads to the commitment that I have right now as CEO in the Critical Minerals Association. So I would say, to summarize, we focus on cost effectiveness of the technologies, because it's very important in order to stay competitive. We also see the part of building a robust supply chain. As I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard about the initiatives that the government has put in place. We have the Department of Energy leading the charge in many things related to the green transition and a circular economy and a net zero commitment for the future. But we also have the State Department and the Department of Defense. And the State Department, just about a year ago, created the Mineral Security Partnership, which is very active in promoting how collaboration works. And I know that I've heard folks from the State Department say, we're going to get it done, but we can get it done in a smarter way if we collaborate more with our allies and our partners. And there's a lot of them there. There's obviously a lot of rhetoric out there and narrative. I tend to stay on the positive side because, if anything, before coming to this role, I understand that you, instead of making up excuses, you got to roll up your sleeves, get to work, and do what's necessary. And I think that we all can contribute. So I do believe in collaboration is key. And last but not least, there's multiple phases of creating a strong battery industry in the US, one of which recycling is a big component of it. And I think that fostering and enabling those opportunities. Just recently online in Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, came online a big recycling facility. We do have Tennessee playing that. And the East Coast, for other reasons, Massachusetts have been gathering a lot of talent to that fact. So I am optimistic about where we are, and those components are the only thing that can maintain a global leadership and competitiveness for the US, but by all means, it's all about collaboration, and we strongly believe in that.
Amen to that. I think that's so true. And I also heard echoes of Barack Obama in what you just said then, about making sure that you're someone that gets stuff done. And I think we've all commented on that being an important part of what we do in an industry that's moving at a really rapid pace. I know time is short, and I'm sure the events organizers are looking at me to hurry up, but I just wondered whether anyone from the audience had a question, and if not, then I'll hand over to my colleagues to give us one last comment. Yes, sir. You might have to shout or stand at the front. Oh, you got a mic there.
Yeah, you spoke about the supply chain, and I think there was a representative here from the company where they identified in America 100% of the supply of graphite was coming from China a few years back, and they capitalized on that and they allowed that. So diversification on sources of where we get. So just kind of like a 2-point question. Why is there a lithium craze per se? Maybe there's an intelligent response to that when there are other minerals also involved in the battery production side. And the other question is about supply chain. When we talk about the sources from where. So like America was in this position where 100% of it was coming from China at one point, and then eventually, you know, this company capitalized on that and got in. So how important that is.
Who wants to take that? It's a two-parter. Greg?
I'll take the graphite side, and I can have a crack at the lithium one if no one else wants to. Look, I think, synthetic graphite currently is available from China, right? It is one of, the biggest bottlenecks or supply constraints in this whole industry is where you're going to get sufficiently pure and the performance of graphite you need to make anode for all of these vehicles. Currently, it's coming out of China. Now, there are sources of natural graphite around the world. Many of them are now being explored. They themselves have their challenges in actually meeting the performance characteristics you need when it gets into anode. But when I look at where we are here, Saudi Arabia, one thing Saudi Arabia does produce a lot of, last time I checked, was oil and gas, a lot of refineries, there's a lot of pet coke that comes out of them. Pet coke is what you need to make natural synthetic graphite, right? So, I mean, if there was ever a part of the world, perhaps other than perhaps the States and maybe up in the UK, but that was positioned to be able to generate an alternative source of synthetic graphite, you'd have to think it was here. Anyone want to tackle lithium?
Yes, thank you for that question. Taking in the East African region, I really appreciated that China is one of the biggest producers of the graphite, but maybe this is going to change because taking Tanzania, Burundi, and DRC Congo, they are producing more than 45% of the graphite on our planet as we are talking now. So this 45%, I'm having, for example, in my country, Tanzania, a region, a province which is known as graphite. So it's simply a graphite. So, I mean, even the name, please, we need to, so that is why we're here in Saudi Arabia, to discuss with the investor that we need to diversify. So, of course, China, welcome, but Africa is coming. So 45% of the graphite on our planet, just from these three countries, Tanzania, Burundi, and DRC Congo. Please. So I think it will be great to...
Yeah, maybe
so China, we are coming.
Oh, wow. That's a competition.
Yeah, maybe I can take your question on lithium. Do you have a province called lithium as well?
Of course, 50% of the lithium on our planet, 70% of cobalt from these three countries, Burundi, Tanzania, and DRC Congo. 50% of the manganese from Tanzania, Burundi, and DRC. So, tell me, whatever we have, is all these critical mineral, only three countries, not to mention the rest. So, please, so we are...
I think the thing, though, about lithium craze, right, when you compare it to, say, other commodities like nickel, for example, nickel's used in so many other industries. So the additional demand we've seen for nickel and cathode, it isn't much, it's off a large base. But the volatility in lithium is because, lithium hasn't been demanded at such scale previously for other industries, right? Yeah. That would be my response.
I guess we're talking about resources. However, how to transfer the resources to the battery-grade materials in between, that's basically the bottleneck. That's what Elon Musk has been talking about. Refining is the bottleneck. That's the key thing you need to tackle. And I guess to help the public sector, maybe in the US, to understand this is critical because this is where you transfer everything from the minerals to the materials that can be made into the batteries. So the key part is the refining part. Unfortunately, for example, lithium hydroxide, back in 2022, total global production 180,000 tons, 90% produced from China, 2% from Australia by a Chinese company, unfortunately. So there's a historic reason. That's because no one else was doing that. So it was only the Chinese who's been doing that. And also, it's a legacy issue. However, that's being addressed. So you have the Aussie miners who wanted to go further downstream to build the lithium hydroxide, for example, in Kwinana, and also Minras is addressing that. Other companies, they're all working on that. But also, for example, in the US, Tesla, Elon Musk is building a refinery. He has recruited more than 10 Chinese engineers to come to the US to help them set up the refinery. So hopefully the supply chain can have a more balanced and more reliable, which can address the geopolitical tensions and also help the supply chain to develop in a more healthy way.
And my only comment about that, in terms of policy, the US created a federal consortium of advanced batteries, spearheaded by the Department of Energy, where they were looking into what were the bottlenecks and the important things to be addressed or goals. They created 5 strategic goals, but one of the key elements of that report is that they recognize, and I guess that COVID actually was an eye-opening moment for everything in the US, particularly on the supply chain side. So that vulnerability speeded most of what's happening today on that front. However, but to your point, you're absolutely right. When on that report is actually detailed how much the dependence was and how the US strategically started to incentivize certain areas. They're not going to get it just with the IRA. It's actually a component and working together with the states, with the local governments, so that they understand where a venture ground up goes like. I mean, there's detailed explanations also from the upstream all the way down mid and downstream as to how the US government is trying to come up with programs to incentivize that. Now, the dependency and on lithium, I'm with you that it's not the only mineral that you can use to build a battery. I recently, actually yesterday, spoke with a group of people that are operating out of Boston because of the synergies with MIT to develop other technologies using other components, including graphite. So I'm, like I said at the beginning of my part, I'm very optimistic about how the future looks like.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to end on, and also the fact that one of the key takeaways for me from this discussion is collaboration being the key thing here to take away and to remember when we're talking about battery manufacturing. I'm afraid that's it. Time is over, but I want to thank my panel. I think you've been fantastic, really great insights, and a really good quick overview of the globe, essentially, of what's going on. Thank you to the audience for bearing with us. I know we've got what they call the graveyard shift, but you've done really well. And I look forward to seeing you all out there and connecting with you all. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.